Good afternoon, students. This is Arindam Bag here, and today we are going to discuss about the chapter 5, 6, and 7. So, I know these things are a bit long, but I can't help it. I'm dealing with a novel, a detective fiction, so I have to be. So, let us move to the chapter 5, which is known as the three broken threads. So, what happens here? Arriving at St. Henry's Hotel, Holmes examines the register, tricking the clerk into thinking he knows the two names added since Sir Henry. He gleans information that excludes the two from suspicion, so the detective concludes the watcher has not settled in Henry's hotel, and as such, very and as such wants very much to see but not to be seen. So this is the first part that happened here. The first incident happened here. The next thing happened here. Heading upstairs, the pair runs into a flustered Sir Henry, enraged at the theft of his second boot. I hope you remember he already lost another boot earlier. This time an old one. Denouncing the hotel staff, Sir Henry is surprised at Holmes' suggestion that the thefts may have something to do with the case. So next we have the at lunch. They were invited to the lunch. I hope you remember previously. So at lunch, Holmes, Watson, Henry, and Mortimer discuss Sir Henry's decision to go to Devonshire, and Holmes assents given the extreme improbability of unmasking the stalker in crowded London. Holmes asks if there is not anyone up at Devonshire with a full black beard and learns that the butler, Mr. Barrymore, fits that description. Intent on assessing whether Barrymore is at home or in London, Holmes sends a telegram to Mr. Barrymore that will be delivered to his hand or else returned to sender. Through this, you can understand that Holmes was trying to determine whether Barrymore was stalking Mr. Henry or not. Barrymore Mortimer relates stood to inherit £500 a cushy work-free setup upon Charles' death. Asking about the other heirs and beneficiaries, Holmes learns that Mortimer himself received £1,000 and Sir Henry got £740,000. The next in line, Mortimer states, is a couple named Desmond, distant cousins. Holmes declares that Sir Henry needs a more attentive bodyguard at Baskerville Hall than Mortimer. Citing previous commitments in town, Holmes declined to go himself and surprises everyone by suggesting that Watson accompany the baronet. Holmes insists that Watson keep him updated. While they are getting ready to leave of their office, they are surprised by a cry from Sir Henry. Diving under a cabinet, Henry discovers the first boot he lost, the new one. It was mentioned earlier. Despite the fact that Mortimer searched the lunchroom earlier that afternoon, the waiter then when asked, denies any knowledge of who placed the boot under a cabinet. So, this is the first part of this chapter. And back at 221 Baker Street, the detectives try to piece together the threads of the case. But they soon hear by wire that Barrymore is indeed in Devonshire. So, the first thought that Barrymore could be stalking Mr. Henry, it comes to the conclusion that it was not true because Barrymore is there and that young Cartwright has not found the mutilated newspaper. However, the cab number proves useful. The cabman himself, irked at what he assumes is a complaint, arrives at the office. Holmes assures that the man that he just contacted the cab company to get some information and promises him half a sovereign if he cooperates. Holmes gets the man's name and asks about his mysterious morning fare. The cabman announces that the fare, calling himself Sherlock Holmes, was nondescript and ordered to him to do just what the detective saw. Amused at his adversary's wit, Holmes is nonetheless annoyed that this third thread of the mystery has snapped. So, this is the development we are having here. Now we are moving to chapter 6 over here. On the morning of the departure, Holmes offers Watson some advice, suggesting that the doctor reports facts only and not conjectures. Holmes also announces that he has eliminated Desmond as a suspect but that Watson should keep a close watch on Henry's all other intimates, including the Barrymores. Though it has been clear that Barrymore was not stalking Mr. Henry at London. Sir Henry's groom, the local farmers, Mrs. Stapleton and Mrs. Stapleton and Mrs. Stapleton. Sorry, there is a mistake over here. Mr. Stapleton and Mrs. Stapleton and Mr. Frankland of Laughter Hall, assuring that Watson has his gun, that Sir Henry will never go out alone. Holmes bids the group adieu. On the trip, Watson chats with Mortimer and Henry, while the baronet admires the scenery of his birthplace. Soon the group spots the fabled moorland, a grey dreamlike expanse, observing Sir Henry's exaltation. Watson decides that his new world traveller is indeed of that long line of high-blooded, fiery and masterful men, a good enough man to brave the Baskerville cars. So, this is the first part of chapter 6. We are moving to the next part. So, at the station, the group is made by a pair of gun-toting police officers. They are basically from Scotland here. They are looking for someone on guard for an escaped prisoner, and by a set of Baskerville servants. The ride to the hall offers a beautiful scenic view, but always with the foreboding moor in the background. Thus, here we can see that Arthur Conan Doyle present the picture, or rather present the nature. Asking about the armed guards, the group learns from the coachman that a dastardly criminal, Selden, the Notting Hill murderer, just recently escaped from the prison. Sobered and silent, the party finally reaches Baskerville Hall. As Barrymore and his wife introduce themselves and start talking, taking down the baggage, Mortimer announces his intention to head home for supper. One side, Watson and Sir Henry learn of the Barrymore's intention to leave Henry's service as soon as he gets settled. Citing their sadness and fear at Charles' death, the Barrymores admit that they will never feel relaxed at Baskerville Hall. They also announce their intention to establish a business with the money inherited from Sir Charles. So they are planning to leave. Later on at dinner, Sir Henry says he understands his uncle's ill health and anxiety given the somber and scary aspect of much of the hall. Once in bed, Watson has trouble sleeping and he hears a woman sobbing. So that's happened here. Now we are supposed to deal with the analysis section. So when Holmes and Watson arrive at Henry's hotel, Holmes surprises us by lying to the bellhop to gain information about the guest who have checked in since Sir Henry. Sherlock also practices deceit, and his trickery clues us into a maneuver he will pull when he suggests that he cannot go to Devonshire to handle the case in enlisting Watson. Holmes plays his own game of disguised identity. Watson acts as in Holmes' secret ears and eyes. Thus, Holmes will be there through the conduct of Watson. This section also depicts an interesting treaty between Holmes and Watson. When Holmes sends Watson up to Devonshire, he insists that Watson report just the facts. It has been there because he has a tendency to analyze things, but Holmes was aware about this thing, so he asked him to report just the facts. Though Watson reveals in the trust and responsibility his friend affords him, it seems clear that Holmes doesn't give Watson enough credit. Then again, Watson is used to much more abusive relationship with Holmes, so his expectations for their interactions are low. In The Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax and the Solitary Cyclist, Holmes criticized his friend's abilities with an acid tongue. So that's happened. The shift in perspective engendered by Watson's newfound authority allows the novel to present a series of clues without a series of hypotheses based on the clues. Learning the clues before, Holmes gives us a chance to try our hand at solving the mystery. Doyle often achieves the same effect in other novels because Holmes has a tendency to keep tight-lipped about his plans and theories. It has been, if you read original novel, you will find that how he keeps things to himself. However, in this novel, Watson has the opportunity to stumble along with us, suggesting theories that may or may not be true. So, moving to the next part of the analysis, and once it is been found that Watson finally arrives in Devonshire, the so called Notting Hill murderer pops up out of nowhere. In a novel that shatters the easy answer by providing obvious clues, the manuscript, the country chronicle, here is the easiest answer of all: a murderer on the loose. At the same time, it seems jarring and improbable to count the convict among the suspects because of the structure of the book. First, is the arduous step of a curse and a hound. Second, there are still over 100 some odd pages left in the book. The murderer on the loose is dangled in front of us as a red herring, an unlikely candidate who just might be the culprit after all. So this is the analysis we have here. So next we are moving to the next chapter, which is known as chapter 7, the Stapletons and Mary Pitt House. Stapleton, you know already that he is the villain actually. The next morning, Watson and Sir Henry discuss the advantages of Baskerville. Sorry, the page changed. The next morning, Watson and Sir Henry discuss the advantages of Baskerville Mansion, but Watson nonetheless mentions the crying he heard the previous evening. Sir Henry admits that he also heard the sobbing, but that he thought it was just a dream. Asking Barrymore about the incident, Watson notices that the butler gets flustered. He later learns that the man's suggestion that it could not have been his wife crying is a lie. Watson sees the woman's red and swollen eyes. That's why he was quite sure. Watson wonders at the butler's lie and at the woman's tears, speculating that perhaps Barrymore has the bearded stranger back in London. He decides to make sure Holmes' telegraph was actually delivered into the butler's own hands, so he takes a long walk out of the Grimpen postmaster. Questioning the postmaster's delivery boy, Watson learns that the telegram was actually delivered to Mrs. Barrymore, who claimed that her husband was busy upstairs. The boy did not see Barrymore himself. Confused by the back and forth of the investigation, Watson wishes Holmes was free to come to Devonshire. So that means at first Watson was quite sure that Barrymore has nothing to do with the stalking, but later on it was found the telegraph was handed over to Mrs. Barrymore. So still there is a room for some suspicion. Just then a small stranger carrying a butterfly net uh, appears, calling Watson by his name. Mr. Stapleton of Merripit House introduces himself and excuses his casual country manners. Mortimer had pointed Watson out, and Stapleton only meant to accompany the doctor on his walk home. Stapleton asks after Sir Henry and expresses his concern that the baronet should continue his uncle's good work. He also remarks at the silliness of the local superstition, at the same time suggesting that there must have been something to scare the weak-hearted uncle's death. Watson is surprised that Stapleton knew of Charles' condition, but the naturalist explains that Mortimer clued him in. The doctor is equally off put by Stapleton's subsequent mention of Sherlock Holmes, but he quickly realizes that his friend's celebrity status has preceded him and tells the inquisitive Stapleton that Holmes is occupied in London. Watson refuses to tell Stapleton anything specific about the case, and the naturalist lauds his discretion. Walking alongside the moor, Stapleton points out the mystery and danger of the place, highlighting the great Grimpen Moor, a stretch where a sort of quicksand can stack up either main or beast. Just then the two spot a pony being swallowed up by the sand, even though, as Stapleton brags, the pony knows his way around well enough not to get into trouble. As Stapleton dissuades Watson from trying his luck, the two hear a low, sad moan that the local suspect is the howling of the hound of the Baskervilles. Stapleton also points out some low stone buildings along the moor, the residence of Neolithic man. This moor is actually, when Stapleton points out this one, it's actually indirectly he is threatening that there are some dangers, hidden dangers. Even people who are quite familiar with the geography of the moor, they can still be killed over here. Suddenly, Stapleton goes bounding off after a butterfly, and and Watson finds himself face to face with Miss Stapleton, who was walked up unnoticed. She has been described as a stunning dark beauty, the next exact opposite of her brother. She cuts off Watson's introduction by telling him to go back to London and insisting that Watson said nothing to her brother. Reappearing at Watson's side, Mr. Stapleton discovers that his sister had thought Watson was Sir Henry, and proper introductions were made. The three made their way to Merripit House, and Watson remarks that the spot seems a strange and melancholy uh, place for their pair to choose. Stapleton suggests that they get along fine, though his sister seems unconvinced. The naturalist tells Watson of a previous career as a schoolmaster up a north, but insists that he prefers the opportunity the moors provide for collecting and inspecting insects. So, here we have some brief introduction about Stapleton. Watson leaves and Stapleton asks that he tells Sir Henry for his intention to pay a visit. On the way home, Watson encounters Miss Stapleton, who has run up to catch up with him. She tells him to forget her warning, though Watson presses her for more details. Miss Stapleton tries to play off her outburst, claiming to be concerned about the cards and eager not to be contradict her brother, who wants a charitable Baskervilles residence. Watson is more confused than ever. So that happens actually. So we are moving to the analysis section. Our encounters with the Stapletons provides more question than it answer. When Stapleton first meets Watson, he asks all kinds of questions about Holmes, about the case, about Sir Henry. On one hand, we are supposed to believe that convict's behavior makes him look suspicious. He is convicted killer who recently escaped. On the other hand, we are supposed to believe that Mr. Stapleton is trustworthy, and his actions make him appear to be genuinely concerned person and as an unsuspicious character. In this chapter, we receive an introduction to Stapleton's past life as a schoolmaster, a piece of information that is not helpful until Holmes later checks upon it. This factor about Stapleton justifies Holmes' later investigation because it gives a shred of credence to that would otherwise seem a shot in the dark or out of the blue explanation of the entire case. We wonder whether there is another reason for Doyle to mention Stapleton's past other than to tie the plot together in end. Miss Stapleton, for her part, plays a shadowy role that only becomes clear upon a close reading. Once we realize that Beryl is not an Englishwoman but rather a Costa Rican, her actions and attitudes take on a whole new and uncomfortable layer of meaning. If Doyle's depiction of characters like Cartwright and Barrymore's evinces a certain classicism, then Beryl Stapleton ends up in a role of an exotized shaman, less like familiar Cassandra than a sultry Latin Cersei. Doyle spends a lot of time describing her dark beauty and her different way of speaking. Presumably, these facts are supposed to fit neatly into the rubric of clues that end up revealing who the Stapletons really are and what this whole mystery means. At the same time, the Costa Rican Stapletons are intended to add that layer of a mystery that only an exotic culture can offer. In both sense, Beryl's identity and the way of the novel treats her reveals the different assumptions and stereotypes about the ethnicity that colored Holmes and Doyle's England. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you again.